Hi everyone, today I'm joined by Jessica Turpin. Jessica will be tutoring Latin with her eyes. Jessica is a home educator as well. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, thanks, Emma. So, I'm a home educator. We've got seven children, and the oldest is 15 at the moment. The youngest are 7-year-old twins, and we've got a few ages in between. So, we've been home educating really since my oldest was just a baby. We've always wanted to teach our children at home, and it's been brilliant for our family. We've really loved it, and I'm looking forward now to doing something a bit different and to tutoring other people's children in Latin as well.
Lovely. So, as a home educator, you've taught your own children Latin, haven't you?
Yeah,
Um,
I have, yeah.
yeah, and I remember you said that this was one of the biggest highlights you've had in your homeschooling. Why was that?
Well, I don't know. It's funny. I remember we chose to kind of go the classical Christian route, and I remember reading Susan Wise Bauer's book, The Well Trained Mind, at the beginning, and she wrote about teaching Latin, and I saw it in a few places, and I always thought I could never teach Latin. Like I've got enough on my plate. It's not something I'm taking on, and for some reason we got into it. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we made a start, and I've just really enjoyed it. I think I have a mind for languages, so I studied French and Spanish at university. And then I went on to live in Germany for a couple of years. So I learnt German while I was there. And I've always learnt languages kind of by osmosis, I guess, by just kind of hanging around people who speak another language. And I've enjoyed that. But this is the first time I've learnt a language, I think, systematically from the bottom up. So, properly how the grammar works and how the language fits together. And I found it very, very enjoyable. But also, as we're learning it, I just see connections right across the curriculum. So, we're learning a bit of maths and we spot a Latin word, or we're learning some science and we find a Latin word. And it just really has brought it all together for me really well. And it's been one of the highlights of teaching my children at home.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
So when you planned your classical, so did you think I have to do Latin because I'm doing classical education, or was it just we'll see how it goes and
Yeah, it's probably the second. I think I thought I don't have to do it.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't say that you necessarily have to. Yeah, I think mums have got a lot on their plate, so I wouldn't want to say that Latin is something that you have to do classical education. But I think I just kept coming across it, and I thought, look, I like languages. I should at least give it a go. And I think from the beginning, maybe it just fits with the way I like teaching, and I think my children responded quite well to it. So it was more kind of, I'll give it a go. And then I accidentally found myself really enjoying it and accidentally found it was a real benefit to everything else that we were doing.
I think that's something that's universal. When I speak to other home educators who've done Latin with their children, that they have found it so beneficial, which maybe
Yeah.
be quite surprising.
Yeah,
Um,
I think you don't realise how much the English language is built on Latin. So even I think it might have been yesterday or the day before, I was doing with one of my daughters, my 10-year-old, we were doing about how to deal with data in maths. And we looked at the word data and I said, look, data, that's a Latin word. Because words ending in A are often Latin. And I said, what's the singular of data? Because words ending in A are Latin words, which are plural as well. And then she knew immediately it was datum with a UM at the end. And then it also makes a little bit more sense of what we're doing in maths when we think about data, because data isn't one piece of information, it's lots of pieces of information that we're trying to understand better and we're trying to put into forms that we understand better. And these little things just happen all the time. So
yeah.
it makes the rest of our curriculum a little bit more interesting.
I did a little bit of Latin at school. I went
Yeah.
to the normal kind of your bog standard comprehensive.
Yeah.
And we did actually have a classics department at the
Right.
time. It is now closed. I was actually the last intake within that classics department and did
Mm.
Latin.
Yeah.
And I found so I really enjoyed it, but I really actually wanted to go on and do it. It was the Scottish system then. It was called standard grades, which are no longer in existence.
Yeah.
It dates me a bit. Um, but I wanted to do the standard grade. I found so at when I was at school, I actually really struggled with reading in English. I
Mm.
loved reading. I loved books, but I was quite dyslexic. It really, I found it so hard to learn to read through primary school. And by
Really?
high school, my spelling was awful to the point I actually had to go to learner support services.
Yeah.
So I found this, I was so ashamed. Every Monday, I had to go to the learner support to help with my spelling, with just spelling tests. I'd forget the words that I was learning to spell the next week, but this is how they did it. It wasn't, I don't think it was probably the most beneficial way of helping
Mm.
my dyslexic self. I was also doing French, but then we did Latin in our second year at high school. And I found my English, my spelling, my French, everything improved so much from doing Latin.
Mm.
More than all this kind of extra support, which had very little, minimal help. It was the Latin which really just improved everything else to do with
Really?
languages and English for me. It was so yeah, I think I can absolutely see how that's beneficial. Learning Latin is beneficial to English in general.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting you say that because it used to be that Latin was the next step after phonics. So children would learn phonics, they'd learn kind of all the basic words in the English language,
Mhm.
and then they go on to learn Latin, which gave them an understanding of other subjects. So a lot of Latin words are found in science, they're found in maths, they're found in theology. If you ever
Yeah.
read theology books, they're often, especially the Puritans, there are often little Latin phrases in there which are put really succinctly and beautifully in Latin, which you
Mhm.
can't translate with that same grace that the way they were put there
Yeah.
originally. I think it's in economics. I mean, I'm learning as I go along. It's in politics, it's in law, it's
Mhm.
just everywhere. And yeah, it makes sense to me that you found that really helped your reading, and that's just really encouraging for me to hear.
It kind of follows on. We can sort of talk about this anyway, but so many people when you say, "Oh, you're doing Latin," they say, "Well, what's
Yeah,
the point? It's a dead language. Why on earth
yeah,
would you learn it and put all that effort in? Because obviously it's not a simple thing to pick up." How
yeah.
would you respond to people who say
Yeah,
that?
well, I think it's dead in the sense that it's not Latin isn't spoken today, but it's alive in the sense that I would say English, Italian, French, Portuguese, Spanish, Romanian, all these languages are built on Latin. I think even German has Latin words in
It
it.
has some, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's meant to be the Teutonic languages. I think maybe Swedish and a few others as well. So it's alive in the sense that maybe half of these languages come from Latin. It's alive in the sense that you see it across the curriculum. And I think back now, so I had a languages background, and of course, providentially, I never had the opportunity to learn Latin. But I think now, if I had learned Latin first, it's true that the work that I put into learning the other languages would have been cut in half because I never really learnt grammar until now I'm learning Latin. And I think now, if I were to learn a new language from scratch, I would know what I'm looking for. So I know I'm looking for these different tenses. I'm looking for the helping verbs that form these tenses. I'm looking for word order. I'm looking for what prepositions do. I think I've got the right questions
Yeah.
now. And I think I would just learn another language a lot faster now I've got some grounding in Latin. So, yeah, dead in the sense that nobody's going to be talking Latin and perhaps we don't know how to pronounce it properly, even, but alive in the sense that once your eyes are open to it, you just see it everywhere you go.
That's interesting that I just you just said about asking the right questions.
Yeah.
I think as a home educator, I've really realised that so much of good learning comes from asking the right questions, and you
Yeah.
don't always know the right questions to ask. So you're absolutely right. You've got this grounding in Latin, which is like the foundational piece,
Mm.
and then that informs the learning for
Yeah.
other languages.
Yeah. I think it's meant to be like the perfect example. I can't remember how it's put. If you come across Dorothy Sayers,
Yes,
she wrote an article and thing, The Lost Tools of Learning.
yes,
And she said, I wrote it down actually. Let me just try and spot it. Um, she said that Latin is the best grounding for education because I think once you learn how Latin fits together, you sort of learn how not just languages but how subjects fit together. So you want the nuts and bolts, you want the vocabulary to begin with, and then you think about you start to think about why things happen, how sentences fit together, and then finally you're learning to express yourself. So I guess using Latin to kind of express what you're trying to say. And so, yeah, I think it's just an excellent example of how to learn things well classically. And I really hope that people will get that from me as I tutor them as well, that it's just a great way of learning from the bottom up and
Absolutely.
really thoroughly.
My father, he is 84. So he
Yeah,
was born in the 1940s, and he had like the traditional he was from England,
right,
traditional English grammar school education.
right,
So
okay.
they learnt Latin. So just like you said, the
Oh,
old classical way of teaching, you would learn your phonics and you do your Latin. So
yeah,
he did Latin at school. And I remember when he first got a Kindle, when we first got the Amazon Kindles, he
yeah,
was able to download all these old books of like the Aeneid in
yeah.
Latin, and
All
he was
right.
and read, and he was all excited because he could read
Okay.
the Latin of these old classics. But we went on holiday to Spain one year,
Yeah.
and he bought a Spanish newspaper. He'd never learned Spanish,
Hmm.
but he could piece it together from his
Hmm.
schoolboy Latin that he
Yeah. Yeah.
years and years he hadn't done any Latin, but he was piecing it together just
Yeah.
from that, and it was this because the Spanish is rooted
It's
in
rooted in Latin.
Latin.
Yeah, and the other thing about Latin is it's meant to be a formative subject. So in the way that kind of in the sciences, maths trains the brain. You tutor maths, don't you? So
Yes.
I think you'd say maths really trains your brain to think systematically about things. So Latin is kind of the maths equivalent for the arts. It really trains your brain to be precise.
Yeah.
You have to really pay attention to word endings because that tells you something that word order would tell you in English. You're looking at the endings in Latin to understand how a sentence fits together. So it really demands precision and it really demands hard work, which I think is something we really want to be instilling in our children, that it's not necessarily an easy life. We have to
Yeah.
work hard in this life. And so I think Latin kind of really gets that muscle of the brain working. So there are far more benefits than just learning, a language. It also actively helps us to think better.
It does, and I think as well, in this age of AI, we're hearing
Yeah.
so much coming out about how people are literally losing the ability to think well.
Yeah, yeah,
They're using adults who are using AI a lot are you're seeing the effect on brain scans of
mm,
that decline in cognitive ability, and that is just going to get worse. And I think as parents, not that every parent needs to teach their child Latin, but that we need to be really aware of um, training our children to think. And Latin is an amazing tool to enable our children to, just what you said, build that grey matter, to
yeah,
think, to be precise, to be thoughtful, and to work hard at something that is difficult and get that reward for that hard work.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm often quite inspired. So I quite like reading books about sort of education in the past. And you look at these guys who went to university and they didn't teach Greek at university because it was assumed you knew Greek, it was assumed you knew Latin. And what some of the exercises they had to do, I think they'd be given a text in English, they'd have to translate it into Greek. And then translate it from Greek into Latin.
Wow.
It's like their minds can handle these things that we find mind blowing. And I don't think I would ever. Maybe I don't know how many years I've got. I don't know if I'll ever get to that point in this life. It would be wonderful. But I just think we're making the first step so that I say to my children, I'm learning this subject alongside you, but you will teach it better to your children. And I'm just trying to put that first step in place in this generation. And I really hope that many of us mothers are just trying to put those first steps in place, thinking, however imperfectly I can teach my children this subject, at least I can get something started that a few generations from now might be done with excellence. So I really think that with Latin, however, it might be a new thing for many of us, but we can just get something started that our children can run a little bit further with. And maybe we can really repair those ruins a little bit, get some of the future generations thinking and learning like our ancestors did.
Absolutely. It's and I think thinking about home education in general is about that rebuilding those ruins.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
rebuilding that loss of our Christian heritage
yeah,
and passing on our faith to our children. But
yeah,
there's also that educational, that intellectual rebuilding that it has been lost in our
yeah,
society. We're really seeing this disintegration of the education system in the wider society, and as home educators, we are pushing against that and rebuilding something that is being really lost and
absolutely, yeah,
destroyed.
yeah. I was interested. I don't know if you've read the book by, is it the Blue Dawns, Laurie Blue Dawn or something? They wrote a book
Yeah.
something about the trivium,
Teaching the
and
trivium.
yeah, and I remember and this is the reason we as a family got interested in classical languages. I remember reading it when my oldest was 5, and they said historically revival happens on the back of people learning the biblical languages. So the biblical languages would be Greek and Hebrew, and very often when people return to reading the scriptures in their original language, that's when revival happens. Now the thing about Latin is, okay, you might say the Bible's not written in Latin, but many of the great theologians wrote about the Bible in Latin, and many of these texts have just never been translated. They're all in Latin waiting for us, waiting for
Oh.
people to come along and translate them. So if you ever read the Puritans, I mean, they've always got loads of nuggets in Latin, but often their works were in Latin because that was kind of the universal languages. And I just think it excites me to think that we might raise a generation of children who are well versed in these classical languages more than you or I
Yeah.
might ever be, and who can really get back to what the scripture said in the original language and to what some of these great theologians said in the original languages, because we know that things are always lost a little bit in translation, and we might be blessed by the Bible being in English, but of course it's always better to know what it actually says at its root and to know what some of these theologians are saying. So I think there's something really exciting about getting to grip with these classical languages, and it's not just so we look good, or it's not just because then we can say we're learning Latin, but there's a real there's something very rich for us to get from our heritage if we can get these languages back into our children and into our families and into this culture.
C.S. Lewis writes extensively about this idea of going back to old books.
Yeah,
Going
yeah,
back and reading the old books, the old thinkers, the old theologians, and that they
yeah,
have this treasure trove of riches that can inform the church.
yeah,
And he was talking obviously in his day, but in our day as well. The
yeah,
Vulgate was also so the Vulgate, the for those that are listening, the the Bible had been translated from the Greek and the Hebrew into Latin. That's called the Vulgate. And today,
yeah,
biblical scholars they will where there might be some ambiguity in some original manuscript in either the Greek or the Hebrew, they will cross-reference it with the Vulgate because the people who translated the Vulgate were closer to the original Greek and Hebrew text. So even within the Latin version of the Bible, although it wasn't originally written in Latin, there is still um, value in going back to
absolutely.
that text.
Yeah, there really is, and it's really lovely you see that as well. I think there's a great value to getting back into these languages, and I don't want to say that Latin is compulsory for a classical education, because I just think as mums we're all working so hard, and the last thing is that we want is this other subject dumped on us that we're told we have to do. But if you can, it's just so rich, and I think that's one of the reasons I want to offer to tutor it, because it's one of those things I think I can just give to a few more people. And as my children are getting older, so my oldest is 15, I found I can't track him in every subject. It's just, I've got 7 children. I just can't keep up with him in every subject. And I've realized that. I'd love to, because I love learning with him. But some subjects I've had to kind of pull in some extra support for from Arise and other places. But I've really determined I'm going to stick with Latin as long as I can, because that's something I think I'm able to do, along with a couple of other things. But I'd love to be able to bless some other families with this support, and that's one of the reasons I reached out to you to see whether it's something I could help with. I just think, yeah, it's just something I'd love to help other families get excited about. And maybe other mums can do it for themselves, but sometimes it's nice to have that little extra bit of support. So that's why I'm really looking to see if I can help other people in that area, tutor other people in that area.
That's just lovely. It is so you can hear the passion that you have for the subject. It comes
Yeah, yeah,
really infectious that you love this language, the subject. You love teaching it.
yeah.
You've got a passion for it, and that it just shines through. And I think when you're looking for somebody to tutor or teach your children, that's what you want. You want somebody who has a passion for what they're doing because it is infectious. It will be passed on to your children. Another little story from my dad.
Yeah.
Um,
I like your dad.
yeah, I love my dad too.
Never met him, but yeah,
Yeah, so many people say that about my dad. They've never met him. They think
famous.
they all love him before they meet him.
Yeah.
So I said about so he didn't do languages or classics when he went to university. His passion is mathematics,
Right,
and he
okay.
ended up at Cambridge studying electrical engineering.
Okay.
So in his job, he was designing transformers for the national grid.
Yeah.
So I think he graduated in 1960, so early 60s. He graduates,
Yeah.
and he entered the world of work at this really unique time. You have this transition from this classical education, but he comes into the world of work at a time when computing is just in its infancy.
Hmm.
And as he worked, he had to learn to code. So by the end of his career,
Hmm.
everything he was doing was coding. He was coding programs to design transformers.
Hmm.
And so he learned that as his working life developed. And he said he learned to code by learning Latin.
Really? Oh, right.
Yes.
That's what he said then.
He said that the grammar of Latin works the
Right.
same way as the grammar of coding. The way you have changing the endings and the logic of Latin and the logic of coding was
Really?
was interchangeable in his mind.
Well, that's really interesting. What
Yeah,
a lovely testimony there. He
yeah.
probably thinks, why have schools given up
Right.
on this
Yeah,
subject?
he despairs at the education
Yeah, I
system.
can imagine. That's why home educators are trying to bring it back in.
Yes, yes.
Oh, that's really good.
So you're going to be using the Prima Latina
Memorial. Yeah, yeah.
from Memoria Press. Why have you chosen that curriculum?
Well, it's the curriculum I teach my children. So it works really well, but I think it just teaches it very systematically and very excellently. And I think the way it happens is that every book kind of cycles back on what you've already learned and then teaches it in a bit more depth, which I think is very classical. So in Prima Latina, we learn what a noun is, what a verb is. I'm trying to remember a few prepositions. We learn, I think, maybe 120 words of vocabulary. The next book, you cycle back. We repeat most of that vocabulary and add a bit more. We go into a noun in a bit more depth, a verb into a bit more depth. And the nice thing then is when you hit the second book, you open a chapter and the children look at the page, and I'm tutoring another child and she looks at it and she already knows half the vocabulary on the new page. So she's not daunted by the new page. She already knows half of it, and then the rest of it isn't too hard because it's a bit like English anyway. So I think it really gives children that confidence that they can do it, they can master the little bit I'm going to give them to do, and then they can add to it, hopefully, in the following years. So I just find Memoria Press very systematic. Now, the Prima Latina is actually written for slightly younger children. We're going to be tutoring ages 11 sort of plus, maybe 11 to 13, maybe a bit older.
Yeah.
So it is designed for slightly younger children, but we're going to go at twice the rate. So we're going to do 2 chapters a week and try and cover it all in 15 weeks, which I think is doable. I
Yeah.
think we need to work hard, and I would really encourage people. This course isn't just a laugh, it's one we're going to take seriously. We're going to really try and master that vocabulary. We're going to master the endings that we learn, even though we don't understand why the endings are there. That will come back. We'll learn why they're there in a later book. We're just going to memorize them this time round, and it'll all start to fall into place, hopefully, over the years if people decide to see it through. So, yeah, Prima Latina, I've taught it with my own children. I'm still teaching it. We've really enjoyed it, and I think it's just an excellent way of learning Latin.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
No worries.
I will be linking down below to Jessica's course,
Yeah.
so you can find out more information there. And Jessica, it's been an absolute delight having you on the podcast.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.